right. Well, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Brianna, and I am the resident artist for WatercolorSnacks, and I will be taking you through this class today. So I'm just going to start off by saying, if you follow any of my personal work, you will know that I'm not a realistic painter or artist. I actually am very bad at realism. I'm very cartoon and stylized. So some of you are probably gonna be able to take the example that we have going and really run with it and like get it perfect. And some may not, and you'll be just like me. So I wanted to take us through a candle. I kept it pretty simple because we're going to be focusing on illumination. I figure with the holiday season happening, there are people that celebrate all different kinds of holidays, but I feel like the one thing that is always in common is candlelight. Like it's just a very wintry, happy thing that happens and is part of most holiday traditions. So I figured let's just start with that. So we're going to be doing some illumination practice. Sarah, can you highlight the main image so it's big on the screen?
Yes, I'm pretty sure I have it at. All right, so I remove spotlight. So overhead camera will be spotlight for everybody.
There we go.
Is that better? Okay.
Yep, perfect. Thank you.
No problem.
All right. So I got our example piece right here. We've got our reference photo, and I did leave a download link so you can download it onto your phone or your iPad, your computer, or you could even print it off. When you print it off, it's not as clear, or at least not with my printer, but it will work for the job. I did keep my paint that I used for this demonstration in my palette because we're just going to be kind of working with these colors. And I'm just going to lightly touch on this because this has actually been a discussion that's been going on in Mix, and that is like how to work with the palette after the paint is dried. There's some inconsistency. It can get super diluted. One of the best ways is to remist it. Don't just add water with a paintbrush because that will just automatically dilute your color. But if you take a little spray bottle, and it just needs like 2 or 3 sprays, and you can just let that rest, and that will work on activating your palette. You'll be able to like pick up the color directly without having to dilute it with water. So we do have a sheet for some practice that we'll be doing, but for the sake of time, we are going to be jumping in to do this first step because we're going to need a little bit of dry time. So I like to try and utilize our time. Start by using your fan brush. I'm going to try and take you through all of the mixing as best I can. I'm taking the fan brush because it is actually the biggest brush that we have of this set for this quarter. There's a cat hair there. And what we're going to do is we're going to start by laying a wet on wet. So we're just going to like dampen our entire page with water, and this will give you the largest range to go as quick as possible. You don't want puddles. So you just kind of want it to have a nice sheen. I do have my piece taped down and mounted to a board, which helps it to keep from bowing or warping, I should say. And then once your piece is all nice and wet, what we're going to do is we're going to pull, and I'm just going to use the same fan brush. We're going to pull from the ultramarine, and we're going to lay it over in our palette because we want a really diluted, water or color, I should say. Really diluted color. Now use your practice sheet. I've still got some room left over on this one to test it out. And that's good. Because you want it to kind of be like barely visible. You want it to be super transparent, kind of barely visible. Taking my oval wash brush, I'm just going to go in and I'm just going to start to dab it into these corners. And if you find that it's not really spreading, like it's not really fanning out with water, that could be because the water has dried up a little bit. With the hot press, I do notice the water can dry up a little quicker, which is okay. And what we're doing is we're just kind of starting with the outer corners. We're just adding very faint color. So all you can see on the camera is pretty much my glare, because you can see the moisture reflecting from my lights. But there's really not a lot to it. I don't know if you can even see it on the camera, but it should be really, really light, because when you're dealing with any sort of light source, always start lighter. Always start lighter on your page when dealing with watercolor, especially, and go darker. So now once we've got just kind of a nice circular range of that color, that ultramarine color, very faint on the outer rim, I'm going to take some of that yellow color. I'm going to apply it into my pan, and again, do the same thing, diluting it down until it's very, very sheer. And when you're trying to get the right colors, I always try and test it before I move on. I'm seeing more cat hair in my work than I'm seeing color, which is interesting. And what we're going to do is we're just going to lightly apply this to right around where that flame is going to be in our photo. So that flame is, it's kind of like right, not quite in the middle center, but in the horizontal center. And I'm just kind of fanning it out. We just want a little bit. And I'm just adding some water so it doesn't have like any sort of harsh edges. Give you a moment to finish up that part before we practice the next. All right. So once you've had a chance to lay in your color, and again, we're going very, very faint. We're going to let it dry a little bit more before we start working with it. And we're going to come over to our practice page here. And we're going to work on, well, essentially we're going to create a shape. We're going to grab our tiny, what is this one called? This is the round size 2. Now, if you'll notice in these candle flames, the thing to notice about them is that they're white in the middle. It's actually just pure white, and it's got the color around it. So we're essentially going to be pulling from a negative space. And what we're going to do with that is let's mix the orange. I have some orange, but let's mix some. I'm going to mix some by taking a pretty decent amount of yellow. And then we're going to go for the crimson color, but we're just going to do like 2 or 3 little strokes. We're going to mix that here. And you can start to see we're getting a bit of an orange color going. Feel free to test that. Now that color is good, but it's a little bit red for my taste. So I'm actually going to add some more of the yellow. Because yellow is a naturally lighter color, I often find that I need to add more yellow to my pieces as opposed to whatever darker color I'm using. Because dark color can be very overpowering. Here we go. That's a little bit more warm in tone. Got a little bit more of a red oxide color and then more of a little orange color. And then we can test that out by fanning it and fading it. And see. So that's a pretty good color for me. So one of the things we're going to do is we're just going to create a shape using the negative space. So essentially what we're going to do, loading your round brush up with some water, we're going to go ahead and we're going to I'm just going to do a circle. I'm going to do a little orb. I'm just kind of going around. Now you can do this probably really well with the round brush, but I'm using the little brush in particular because I want to have that detailed control. And from there, from the outline, I am just going to take it and start fanning it out right where it's at. Adding a little bit of water to move the paint some more. And we're essentially trying to create the gradient effect with the darkest color being the closest to the whitest part. One of the best ways to create a contrast, especially when you're dealing with highlights and shadows, is to have your darkest part right next to your lightest part, your darkest shadow. This makes really good effects for like space, planets, and suns and stars and things like that. we're doing a little orb right here. Just for now. I'm thinking, you know, whenever you see some of those pictures, those very crisp holiday pictures, I don't know if that's a term or not, but they sometimes have those round orbs in the background because the light is blurred, like the street lights blurred. And that's kind of what makes me think of this, except it's a little bit on the reverse. It's not because it's still lighter. So just work on trying to see how far you can get that color to fan out once you've started from that line. And I'm actually going in while it's still wet with a little bit more saturation right at the rim, because that color is going to spread out and follow the water where I've laid down all the fanning. I'm going to bring it up to close for you to see right there. It's got a little bit of a glare from the lights, but now this particular color I've added in is pretty packed and it's pretty dark and saturated, but that's okay because this is where you start with your illumination, and you can easily make that color lighter, or you can make around it even darker. So I'm actually going to just pull from the transparent oxide brown. We're just going to make a concentrated mixture of it right here. I say mixture, but it's just going to be its true color. And what you can do from there, adding just a little bit of water to loosen it up. You can follow that rim around it. Now that's actually very close to the color we're already working with, but that's okay, because it's still going to be just a little bit darker. We're creating essentially another circle around this orb. This orb has layers. We've got the main circle, we've got the lighter rim, and then we've got the outer rim. This is where our illumination starts to happen. Now, what I'm going to do next is I'm actually going to add a little bit of the dioxazine purple to this brown oxide. And what this is going to do, it's going to create a little bit more of a shadowy tone. Purple is the universal shadow color. Anytime you're trying to achieve a shadow effect, always pull from purple. People think that the black color is where the shadow comes from, but actually it's purple. Because when adding black paint to your pieces, it can create a bit of a harshness that distracts from the vibrancy and the colors of the rest of your piece. So I always try to mimic black tones and things like that with other colors. There's ways to make that, but you'll always really be pulling from purple. And I'm just adding a little bit with my damp brush, just kind of following that edge, just to kind of blend it in a little bit more. So there's a basic concept of the orb and the illumination of it. I'm going to give you another minute to go ahead and finish up that portion. And a moment, I should say. Right. Now, once you have finished that, we're going to come back to our piece over here, having allowed it a little bit more time to dry. And we're going to repeat the same process. We're going to start by washing the plate and the whole piece with water. Don't work it too much. Just kind of a nice glaze of water. And taking my oval brush, we're going to do the same thing. Pulling from that ultramarine color, and we're going to lay down another layer of it, kind of just on the outer corners. Now, the first layer that we applied, combined with this layer is going to automatically help to deepen out the saturation, because that's the beauty of watercolors. And then the same thing with that yellow color. We're just going to take some of that yellow and we're going to a little bit deeper, just start to blot it in. Don't try and create a wash because the water there, applying it to the wet, is already going to help it to spread out. I'm going to try and bring it up to the camera so you can see. You can start to see a little more color coming into play. It's more visible in real time over on my end, but and as it will probably be for yours, but on the camera, it's a little bit washed out, and that's okay. Once you've done that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start to create some rays and some highlighted rays. And what we're going to do with that is, while the paper is still wet, find where the center point of your flame is going to be. That's going to be your brightest part. So it's going to be like right about here, right about center stage right there. And taking the oval brush, we're just going to start from that point and drag it out. This is with a dry brush. So there's no water. I mean, my brush is damp from use, but there's no moisture held in it. And what you're going to do is you're going to repeat that, just kind of creating a little rain or a little circle of rays. And between each stroke, I'm actually drying it off on my paper towel. And I'm just kind of using it from the side. I'm using my oval brush from the side rather than the flat base of it, because I want to get these rays. Now they could be very, very subtle, and that's okay because you're dealing with a really transparent color. This is really just to make sure that your the place for the flame is going to be as bright as possible. I'm going to set that onto the side and give that a moment to dry, because the next part will need to be less water on there. Coming back to our test page right here, I'm going to repeat the same steps that I did there, except we're going to practice it with a flame. So essentially kind of focusing on the negative space. You'll see I have two different kinds of flames here. One's a little bit more dancing and one is a little bit more tamed in shape. And you can do your flame however you want, because fire is its own kind of beautiful, and you can have a really roaring flame, or you can have a nice subtle little flame, whichever you prefer. I'm adding water to my orange right here. And I'm just going to go in and I'm going to start with one side. And from there, and I'm going to have it be a little bit less saturated than I did with the orb. With a damp brush, I'm just going to follow that outline and just fade it out, because I want it to be as light as possible while still giving a shape, still giving a color. I've done that with one side. We're going to go ahead and repeat that process for the other side, kind of creating this diamond shape, or this teardrop shape, I should say. Again, having just a damp brush, I've wiped off most of the moisture, but it is a clean brush, and we're just going to take it and we're just going to fan it out. And if you need to rotate your page, you can also do that. Taking a little bit more color, I'm just going to go ahead and kind of follow that rim once again while it's still wet. Really focus on getting a gradient, a nice transition from light to dark. Don't let it be a wash. The gradient is what's going to really help sell it. And I want to keep that darker part just subtle. I don't want it to be the darkest as it's closest to the flame, So we have that nice little glow. But I don't want it to be super dark. I went a little bit dark with this orb over here, but that's okay because we're practicing. So now I know to keep it lighter. And remember that we're still going to be adding more layers around that flame right there. So we'll be adding more layers, more shadows. So this will still be one of the lightest points, the part around the flame right there. I actually want to add a little bit more yellow to that. So I'm looking at it, it's not quite yellow enough for me. And I'm just, now you can either add more yellow into your mixture of orange, or if you're like me, you've already laid it down, I'm just going to add a little bit of yellow on top. Because that yellow on top is still going to give it the right tone that I want, because they're both transparent. And that's how we're using layers. Now this practice sheet is also my swatch sheet. So if you see swatches in there, or if you need to test colors and stuff, you use the practice sheet for that, and it creates a beautiful swatch page at the end. One thing I do want to note is that you may find, and I don't know if my camera's going to be able to pick this up, but you may find there's maybe a little bit of unevenness in the flames, like in the glow of the flame. You might find that it's not a perfect circle. There might be some jagged edges or whatnot. And that's actually okay, because we're essentially creating a flame effect. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm just going to real quickly maybe just do one side of the flame to show you what I mean. And this is kind of where my stylizing comes in. I'm just recreating that same effect with the flame, just kind of outlining it, kind of focusing on the negative space, and I'm kind of just going in with these kind of jagged, these are exaggerated jagged textures, but it gives the effect of that round look. So you can have the really like soft glow that's very even, or you can have some of the more stylized kind of streaks. They remind me of like some of the surfer designs, honestly, surfer art with those jagged textures. Just another way that you can add some texture and some flair to your flame. All right, coming back to our piece here, we're going to go ahead and take that technique. We're going to apply it straight onto the page. I'm going to make add a little bit more yellow to my orange mixture. And make sure it's tested. There you go. Yeah, that's a nice golden orange. Kind of using a little bit of water, so I'm not picking up strict paint, and then going right where you essentially removed all the color. So that'll be your brightest point, your lightest spot. Go ahead and create your flame piece right there using the technique that we just practiced. And I'm going in with a damp brush. I tapped it with my paper towel so it's not flooding with water. I'm just creating that nice flame shape right there. Carrying out. That color. Yeah. Now my camera isn't able to pick up a lot of the texture and color around, but you can already see from this, even from this angle, that right there is the brightest point of this, what's down there so far. And that's going to be your focal point for the piece. Now, I'm going to give another moment for you to finish the flame. on that part. Remember, if you have any questions, always feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll have Sarah answer them or read them to me if you have them. All right.
Hey,
So
Bree,
now-
just jumping in to give you a time update. It's been 30 minutes.
Okay, awesome. All right, so we're going to move on to our next piece, and then we're going to be focusing on the candle, because again, we're going to be kind of filling out our positive space, mainly using our negative space. So actually, what we're going to be doing, we're going to go ahead and start to build out the background color. So we got the background color here, and the background color is a variety of layers. So we're going to be starting very simple. We're going to be starting with our ultramarine blue. We're going to create a little bit more saturation to that first one, or to a little bit more saturation than that first round that we made. So adding some of the color, but then adding water to it. Just a slightly deeper tone there. There we go, because we don't want it too dark. Taking my oval brush, my oval wash brush, what I'm going to do is I'm going to outline the outside, the outline of the candle, and then I do that same effect that we did with the flame, but we're going to fan it out away from the candle. So kind of following, I'm not bringing it all the way to like touch the very tip of that flame right there. I'm just kind of starting right below it and just kind of gently making that. Now you can make whatever candle shape that you would like. I'm just going to follow the example piece right here. You can see in the picture. And we're going to be following it because we left the center right there really white because we knew we were going to place a candle there. Taking a damp brush, as I wiped off the excess from my paper towel, so it's just a nice little damp brush. We're taking that and we're just going to kind of fan out the color, soften it. Again, allowing those edges to hold the most saturation. And you're going to go in, and once it's nice and damp, we're going to just add a little bit more so it fans out a little easier. We're just focusing on one side. Again, try and get that to fade as far as you can, going as light as possible. And whenever you're around the flame, remember that we're wanting to preserve that overall glow. We're wanting to preserve that glow around this flame right here. So I'm not taking any of the excess in my brush, any of the excess color in my brush. I'm just kind of following around where that glow is. So we laid down the yellow in the beginning, and that yellow that is still kind of subtly around the flame is where we're trying to preserve. We're going to go ahead and do that same thing over onto the other side. Now, I don't normally do this, but this one time I actually got it right. I actually started, I'm right-handed, so I started from my left and working over to my right. That is a technique to always do whatever hand you are dominant with the most, start from the opposite side and work towards where your dominant hand is. And that's simply so this way you're not resting your hand in wet paint on accident. And I'm just focusing on trying to fade out that color, adding a little bit more once it's been all wet. Just fading it out. So it kind of looks like it kind of looks like a puzzle piece has been picked up out of our image and has been placed somewhere else. So it looks like we're kind of missing a silhouette there. And that's because we're focusing on the negative space. And this is how you can create line work essentially without just going in and drawing the line work. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you're wanting a more subtle, natural feel, there's ways to achieve a line work or a lining, I should say, without actually having to go in and draw all the lines. And a lot of that can be used with negative space. All right. So while the outside of the candle is resting, we're going to go ahead and we're going to create our candle color. Now, our candle in the image, it's a white candle, so naturally it's going to be picking up the colors around it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create that same kind of orangey color, but maybe a little bit more, a little more muted, a little less yellow. So we want it to have a glow. So starting with the yellow, adding a little bit of crimson, maybe like 3 strokes of crimson for starters, and see where that goes. Now it's looking really red to me, but that's okay. Yeah, that's really red. So we're going to add some more yellow to that. And I think we're even going to add a little bit of the brown oxide color. Whoa, that sun came out of nowhere. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry. Are caught. Excuse me 1 moment. So we're trying to create the color, like a natural color. Oops. Using the yellow and orange. No, yellow and red. There we go. Using the yellow and red. Whew. Excuse you, sun. That was rude.
A sunny day in Washington is like unheard of for these live streams.
Well,
so.
And it's already starting to go away as the clouds come back.
Great quick fix, Bree.
Right. Adding just a little bit of that brown oxide. We're going to test that and see how we like it. Now, when you first apply the color, it looks really strong. So if you feel like it's too strong, add some water. There we go. That's a nice glowy color without matching the same tone as the flame there. So we're going to go ahead using our round brush here. I'm actually going to start with a super diluted base of the orangey color that we used for the flame, Very, very subtle. And the reason why is because I want to get that nice glow. And we're going to go ahead and we're just going to go ahead and start to outline it. Now use your oval brush to kind of capture the curves of this candle. Now you could be doing a different candle than I am. You might be doing a candlestick or a larger candle or a cluster of candles. But I think there are some different shaped candles, but most candles I've encountered are round. Now that's a good color, but I feel like it's a little bit deep. I'm just going to take a paper towel, lightly dab at the center of it. And it doesn't take away my color, but it does lighten it just a little bit. Then taking our orange color that we just mixed, I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to kind of follow that outline, kind of showing that there is an edge there. There's an edge where it dips off and the shadow becomes different. And we're just going to kind of fade that down. And find where, now here's where you're going to actually try and find where the curve of your candle is, where the base of your candle is. And you can do that by using this oval brush. Honestly, this oval brush is one of my new favorite things. I've had oval brushes in the past, but I've never really known how to work them until now. Kind of follow the edge. That sounded like a sneeze. If that was a sneeze, bless you. And this is just me removing the cat hair and lint from my piece. I'm just going to lightly, again, kind of go around to that, find that base where it's located at. Now it is darker in the bottom like on the bottom of our candle. It's mostly illuminated up top. It's mostly, but then it gets darker at the bottom because that's furthest away from the light. It's hidden in the shadow. Now, how I did my candle was a little different. There was in the illustration piece, you'll see that there's like, or in the example piece, there's actually like a blue kind of shadow block right there. And I don't quite understand it. So I just kind of went and did my own thing with my own candle piece. Because this is your piece. You make the rules. This is your world. And then going a little bit more, I want to emphasize the curve of where that dip hat goes off. So again, it's that brightest point right there in the candle. And I want to show where it dips off a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a little bit more outline, a little bit more edge to that top one right there, keeping in mind where the shadows are going. All right, I'm getting a candle. And you can add a little bit more as you're working your way down. I like to add some onto the sides, kind of giving the effect that it's a cylinder. All right. So now the next thing that we'll keep an eye out for is we're going to be doing the shadow below, or the glow below the candle, the reflection. But we're going to have to wait until the bottom of our candle is completely dry. So we're going to shift focus and work on the glowing edge on the outer side. So in the piece right here, you can kind of see in the back where it starts to blur. There is, oops, didn't mean to add water to that. There is a, what is it, an edge. There is a corner. That's where your darkest line is going to be. And then it kind of fades up into blue. So we're going to kind of just focus on this top half right here and go from there. So to do that, we're going to go ahead, we're going to mix a deeper ultramarine blue. So again, we've done a super transparent, a medium transparent, and a more saturated now. Now we're onto a more saturated ultramarine blue. And that just means more paint, less water. And I'm just mixing it in my tray. I very rarely like to pull my paint directly from the palette and put it onto the page, like directly from the paint and put it onto the page, because I like it to have the consistency that I want. So I almost always have a palette that I use because I just want it to be consistent as I'm working with it. So now this is our lightest part of the whole piece, and this is our focal point. So we want the rest to kind of contrast that. So we're going to start with these outer corners, removing the cat hair as we go. And with this oval brush is just the star of the show today. I'm kind of starting to fade that out. And then with this right here, if you start to get some paint there and it starts to create a harsh line, dip your brush into some water, dab it with the paper towel, and then you have a damp, but a dry damp brush. It's like a dry damp brush. And I'm kind of using that to kind of find where my outline is, or my halo is, halo of light. I'm kind of working out. And I do rotate my page quite a bit. We're just going to do this for both corners. Now I'm showing you how to get a really like gradient glow, but you could easily do it by doing, you know, a very like having a white circle, having a slightly like darker circle, but still transparent, and then a darker circle around that and letting it be in circles. That's a very animated way to create it. Now I don't want the flame, I don't want the halo to go all the way down to like past the candle. I actually want it to be just around the flame. And the best way to do this is just to start big and work your way inward. And I'm letting the tip of my brush be towards the outside because there's less paint the closer you get to the edge of the brush right there. There's less paint and there's more paint on the tip. So I want to push the paint outwards. I want to push my deepest color outwards, and I want it to fade as I go inwards, which is why I kind of follow these motions, and the oval wash is just great for this. And just one sweep of that while it's still wet just softens it beautifully. And kind of carrying that down to kind of be nice and even. And I'm not really stopping anywhere in particular. I just want to make sure that along the sides, it's pretty faint compared to up top, because we want it to show that there is a wall, there is a space, and we're going to be going in with some darker color here in a bit. Okay. Now, as I'm looking at this, my little rim right there is a little bit, the color is protruding a little bit into that halo. So I do want that, but this feels a little much. So I'm with a slightly wet brush. So I dipped it in water, give it 1 or 2 taps. There's still a little bit of water in there, but not much. I'm just going to gently, lightly scrub at that color, just where the rim would be, that halo. And with a paper towel, we're just going to lightly dab it up. And what this does is it just lifts the color ever so slightly to create a softer effect. It doesn't take it away completely. We don't want it to be taken away completely. We just want it to be a little bit softer. And this is one of those undo buttons, as I call it. I worked in Photoshop for a few years, and I loved the undo button. And I always felt like, why can't we have that in painting and stuff? Well, you can, and that's actually why I love watercolor so much. All right. So by now, our candle is about done right there. So we're going to create a even deeper blue color, but this time we're going to add a little bit of purple. So taking a good amount of that ultramarine color, I'm coming over here where I have my purpley blue mix. And with, I kid you not, 1 swipe of the dioxazine purple, and I'm using a diluted dioxazine purple, mind you, but 1 swipe is all you need. I think dioxazine purple is perhaps the most intense color I've ever worked with across all different kinds of brands. We're trying to create kind of this soft blue. We're trying to create a little bit of a shade variant. There we go. It's got just a little bit of a purple hue because, again, purple is that shadow color. And I'm going to just compare the two. So you can kind of see one is definitely a little bit more purple than the other. This is a little bit more diluted, but if we add this, yeah, we have a purple and we've got a blue. Well, a violet color, I should say. We've got a violet color and we've got a blue. And what we're going to do is we're going to follow the line. So you see right before the reflection hits, there's a little bit of that shadow there because it's, the light isn't all the way to the edge. So naturally, the rim of that candle is casting a shadow just along the edge, but then it goes into a lot of reflection. So what we're going to do is we're just going to try and capture that, taking our oval brush, lightly tracing the rim of that candle. And keeping it very, very minimal. Thicken it out ever so slightly. And if you have to turn it around, go for it. Sometimes that's just easier for me. And then from there, we're going to bring that up and we're going to just slightly past the edge of the candle to show that there is some depth. Because if you did the line right at the edge of where that candle corner is, it would look like it's very flat. But we want to show that there is a background behind it. So we're just going to go slightly above, find that line, and we're going to kind of just fan that out as we go down. And that's kind of really dry right there. So I'm going to add a little bit of water. Soften that edge out right there. We do that same for the other side. Now this side, the only rule is that you want to match up the line to actually don't even really need to because we're gonna blur that line. So never mind. I digress. Kind of fading that out. Again, letting the most of your corner be on your outer rims. All right, now this piece is looking good, but it's really, really faint. So I'm gonna try and add some color. As I noticed that I always play it safe when I'm on screen with you guys. And my class piece, I was always much fainter in color and saturation than my example piece. One swipe of dioxin, one swipe. We're just mixing a little bit more now. If the tones are slightly off, that's okay, because we're just building the layers here. We're going to go in a little bit deeper, kind of following where that edge is. If you need to get into a tight corner, try tilting your brush to the side a little bit more. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to kind of scrub that upwards. I know we did all that to try and find the line of where it rests. And we're going to go ahead and loosen that, but it's okay because we know where that's at. We just want to build from there. Because we want it to be soft. Now they probably shot this candle on a backdrop, so they probably have they got rid of that corner, that dark corner, which is okay. That's totally fine. And then from here, I'm going to get a really good saturation of paint, just paint. And we're going to find where that line was, and we're just going to pack in right at the edge. And what that's going to do, because we've now made both sides really wet, it's going to give us a corner, but it's not going to be a harsh corner. It's going to be a really light corner. And rather than dragging it, the dragging is just going to pull the paint all over. I'm lightly blotting it in to follow that line. And it will naturally start to fade with the colors that we've already laid down because they're already still wet. Now I'm going to take some of this color and I'm going to go ahead while this area is resting a little bit. I'm going to take this color and I'm going to go ahead into the corners up here. And we're going to kind of do that same thing. We're just going to deepen out the tones. So we're going to deepen out the tones here. And I need to mix some more. But this time I'm actually going to mix a more predominant with purple. So we're going to do so instead of one swipe of dioxazine purple, we'll maybe do well, actually that's quite a big puddle I have in my pan right there. So we're basically making a bluer purple instead of a purpley blue. I don't know if that makes sense to anyone, but it makes sense in my brain. Casting some darkness into that page. Kind of lightening it the closer you get to the halo there. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to come back to this little corner here. We're going to just take some and create nice, deeply saturated. Now I'm actually running out of my ultramarine here in the pan because it's been using it so much. Been scrubbing at it all day. I'm trying to get a really saturated. So this is really, really pigmented. So very little water. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to kind of bring it back, pack that in where that corner is while it's still wet. Deepening those contrasts. And then if it's still too harsh of a line, I'm just going to take a little bit of water and drag it down. And I'm fading this as the closer that we get to that reflection, because that reflection is going to reveal a glow. So again, just kind of keeping it closer to the outer corners. Blending it down the further you go in. Now I'm going to take us, while that is resting, before we add the reflection, I'm going to go ahead and take some of that purple color. We're going to create, again, another layer. And I'm being very intentional to create that circle, that halo, with a very faint, a very light dilution of that purple. Now, right now it has a harsh circle around it, but we are going to soften that. Okay. So now we have both corners kind of wet and waiting to dry before we can go on to the next step. So we're going to focus a little bit more on that candle flame inside. So I like to, when I was messing around with this one, I ended up deepening out the flame a little bit. And what we're going to do is take the tiny round brush, and again, following where our line was earlier, now that the area is completely dried, we're able to fan that out. And maybe do a little bit more jagged texture. Kind of just let it be a little bit different than just the flat glow, just the flat light source. Give it a little bit of movement. Okay, now in the candle, we know that there is a stem, like the wick, and then we've got that little tiny blue dot in there. And that's the basics of candles and flames and stuff like that, because the blue flame is going to be the hottest flame. So what we're going to do is we're going to just create a small little wick. And we're going to do that. And I'm just using the round brush here, so I'm not mixing a ton. I'm taking a little bit of the brown oxide and a very small amount of the purple. We're just going to mix that. And this is going to, again, kind of create like our shadow color. We need a neutral. I mean, the wick would be black, but we don't want to use black for this piece, and too much blue or purple is just going to get lost. So adding a little bit of the brown oxide gives it a little bit more warmth. And you can just mix that until it feels right to you. I'm kind of trying to err more on the side of purple. There we go. Test out your piece for your color. That's good. And what you're going to do is you're just going to, take a very diluted cotton tone to start with. We're just going to create a little stem. I didn't put hardly any like definition to it. I just wanted to create, it's like, hey, there is a bridge between the candle and the flame. And then with that, because you shouldn't have needed a lot of water, should have been mostly dry. We're going to do just a very, very faint blue. We're just going to lightly go in and dab that at the base right there. Like, this is hardly any kind of blue. This is kind of what we were starting with. And once that dries, it will have the blue effect, the blue flame that we were looking for. All right. We're going to come back down to our reflection now, starting with that really diluted yellow that we made earlier. We're going to take that with the oval brush and we're going to follow just the edge of that shadow right there. We're just going to carry it down. And I'm not thinking too much about this because it is a reflection. So we can see here the lightest point is in the middle and then it starts to fade into an orange and then fades into the rest. So then next we're going to take that orange and while it is still wet, kind of start to just kind of pack it in there. Now, as I see this, the orange is really good, but then my yellow is really pale and almost muddy and compared to that transparent tone in the back. So I'm going to make a little bit more yellow, slightly deeper, not much deeper, but slightly deeper, more saturated. Just kind of go in there because the reflection is not super light. It's on a dark surface. It's on a dark table. It just, we want to give the effect that it does have a glow. And then with that, I think it's time to mix our actual glow effect. And that's going to be another combination of the oxide brown with the dioxazine purple. More brown than purple, honestly. But what this is going to do is it's going to create a nice warm tone in contrast with all the cool colors we've been using. Now I'm going to lay this down, it's pretty rich. There we go. Always dilute it out to see how you like it. So from there, we're going to just kind of pack that in right up to the outer edge of that orange. Just kind of let it fade into the table there. Wonderful. And you can deepen that because we are going to deepen out those corners with some more of that blue. So it doesn't need to be too light. Like I said, taking some of that blue while that burgundy color is still wet. I'm just going to go ahead and start to pack it in. I'm not really going to be following that outline right there because that yellow is still kind of wet, so I don't want to bleed into it too much with the dark color. But I am going around the corners here. Now my paint's kind of dry there, so hopefully, yes, we're getting somewhere. And then you just want to keep kind of blending the two on the outer rim just till they fade into a nice fade right there. They fade together nice. Now for this reflection, I feel like you can add more orange and be safe. Because again, we're not dealing with a white surface that this is reflecting on. It's against, we're just trying to get the glow. Right. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take this same kind of, we've created this shadowy glow color. I'm going to take a diluted version of it. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go right on the outside of this halo. And I'm only letting it come into the middle of it just to soften it, just to lighten it just a little bit. You can make it a little bit deeper because we still have some more depth to create along the outside. And the point of this is to just create some contrast, again, kind of following those rings of light, of illumination. Letting the inner side be lighter. Let it be the lightest. Try to get rid of any harsh edges that you see and just kind of let them blend together. What this does is it adds a little bit of a contrast. Again, that light against, that warm tone against the darker tone. All right. Now, I've used quite a bit of my ultramarine blue, and I feel like I need some deeper contrast, but not necessarily just purple. So sometimes if you need to have a deeper, richer effect, and that, re-wetting your paint is just not doing it, it's just too much water. Sometimes that's why tubes is kind of great, because then you can just go in and you can just take it directly from the paint. You'll get the richest value out of that. I actually just took a little tiny chunk of it because I'm wanting to create a deeper tone. Getting some of that dioxazine purple in there. Still needing more ultramarine. Again, the dioxazine purple is extremely loud. It is like, I am here, pay attention to me. Our table there is looking a little flat as far as contrast. So we're going to go in and we're going to add some more, at least in mine. Yours might be a little bit different. Take this opportunity to kind of work on some of the areas that you feel like needs a deeper contrast, or a more even blend, or even a less even blend.
Hey, Bree, this is Sarah jumping in.
Okay.
This is looking beautiful. And I just want to let you know that we have about 25-ish minutes left.
Cool. Well, if we finish the piece before the class time is up, then we can practice some more illumination bits. And now this whole section right here, and I'm just explaining what I'm doing for my piece. This whole section right here is kind of wet, but again, I want to keep that kind of, that edge right there. And so I'm taking very, very saturated. I'm just kind of following that line. It's okay if you have to repeat these steps more than once, because you're building the layers. We're building the layers, and honestly, remembering where these are at is kind of key. So getting to remember where your table edge is and whatnot is kind of key. So even if you have to do it, 2 or 3 times, 3 or 4 times, something like that, that's not a bad thing, because it's kind of like you're sketching as you go. You're placing the markers as you go, so you don't forget where they're at. I don't know if anybody else struggles with it, but I feel like I always lose my sketches whenever I am in the middle of drawing or painting especially. I feel like I always lose my sketches and my lines. Now the example piece that we have is very predominant in blue when you look at it. However, our piece, or at least my piece, is looking a lot more purple. And the reason for that is because we needed to create, it's more important to create the value. But if you had like an indigo or something like that, there's plenty of other blues. You could easily achieve the same blue effect. But I kind of like being able to follow a reference photo and then it have kind of come to life with its own color. I kind of like that effect. Just you using the colors that you have around you, kind of pulling from that. Now in my piece, my candle's looking a little flat, the candle itself. So I'm going to go ahead and create a little bit more contrast there. I'm going to kind of pull from, we're going to do this, the reddish orange that we created, plus this burgundy type brown color. We're just going to make our own kind of combination. Kind of just following the inner, I'm not taking it all the way to the edge, because when you're dealing with round cylinder surfaces or objects, they're to take it all the way to the edge kind of creates it a little bit flat. So you want to indicate there is a roundness, which means there would be light coming from the back end. Now, because the light source is mainly held top, we don't see a lot of that. But for the sake of this illustration, kind of reminding myself that, oh yeah, this is a round object, I'm not taking it quite all the way to the edge. And I am going to deepen out that shadow right at the base of the candle right there. Blend that in with the areas around it. Now, something I did like in this piece that I didn't really catch from this piece was the kind of little bit of lightness right there. And what I'm going to do with that is that this area is still wet with a dry brush, dry being like it's been used, so it's still kind of damp. I'm just lifting the color, kind of scrubbing it around. And if your area is a little bit more dry and you'd like to do that, just add a little bit more water. And that created a little bit more of a value scale right there. I could work on this more, but I'm afraid I'm going to overwork it. So I'm going to give another moment. And if you are still working on your piece, by all means, go for it. But if you are kind of in an in-between place, or you want to take a break from it, or you're done with it, I want to go through just a little bit of more practice of how to create some illumination effects. Again, if you are still working on your piece, go for it. You're just going to hear me talking in the background. I'm going to set this aside and let it dry. And I save the tape peeling to do with you guys on screen. So right before show and tell time. Okay, so we started the piece with a bit of a wet on wet, and we're going to do that same thing. So kind of using that fan brush right there. This is just a little extra activity that if you wanted to do, or if you wanted to come back and try later, you can do. Now I laid on the water pretty good because this particular paper dries really fast. And we're going to take nice saturation and kind of blot it in there. I'm not going as faint as I was in the beginning. You can even add some varying colors, like you can add some of the blue in there to kind of contrast with that violet purple, and look how it just spreads. Love it. Just kind of moving on its own. And that's really fun. I'm going to just make sure it's all blended nicely. You can use whatever colors you want. I just like to use the leftover paint that I have. Now we have this little blob of paper of color right there. We're going to go ahead. We're going to do that same effect that we did in the beginning, but you'll actually be able to see it more. I'm just taking my oval brush. I dried it off. And we're just going to create little streaks. They can be longer streaks, shorter streaks. And if you find that your brush is getting too fat, just squeeze out the moisture. Go a little bit darker. We got like a nice star right there. Oops, went in the opposite direction. That can happen. Notice that I do wipe it off between each stroke, because if you don't, you can easily just drag paint into places. And then for a more rounded, kind of smaller, I'm just going to take my oval brush. I'm just going to create a little swirl. It's not lifting it completely, but it's doing better than if I were to just go in and try and draw a circle. Let your brush do the work. I feel like that's something that all of us painters can take away from. Let your brush do the work. Ooh. So if you do these streaks between each take or each stroke, just wipe it off, squeeze it out with a paper towel instead of dabbing it, because then you retain your shape of the brush to create these beautiful stars. Now that looks great, except it's pretty faint. But what you can do next, you can take a detailed brush, now that you know where your stars are at, and you can start to create, again, kind of letting that that lightest part contrast with your darkest shadow. And you can just kind of gently, and this might be better to go in whenever it's fully dry, but you can also let it blur. You can just follow where you've already laid down your highlights. Again, this is really, really, really good for like starry skies. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm very obsessed with stars and glowing, anything I can add gold to, or glittery effects, which usually end up being stars, but I just find they are so versatile. Galaxy effects are so versatile. Now that's just half of it, but up here on the screen, I'm going to bring it up close. You can see how this half is so much more predominant than this half, even by just a little bit. And you can always continue to add more to that. You can deepen it more. You could create like a navy sky if you wanted to. And you could even go in while it's still wet, just kind of pack it into the corner, let the water do the rest. Finds to be very relaxing. One more little stem right there. And I'm going to go ahead and remove the washi tape. So if you live for the satisfaction of washi tape removal, here it is for you. And we've got 2 layers of washi. I'm just going to take my time. Now, there haven't been any questions, so I'm assuming that everybody's doing pretty good.
Hey, Bree, we've got about like 10 minutes left, so this is like perfect timing.
Mhm.
And I am definitely enjoying the tape peeling right now.
I learned my lesson. Don't do it off camera. Do it on camera.
Why did you do 2 layers of washi tape? Just curious.
So I actually, I'm really bad about measuring with my eye. So I actually use this really thin layer of washi tape. It's like 1/4 of an inch. And I basically use that to outline my page. It's really great for framing because about 1/4 inch is what you need, maybe a little bit less. But this way, all I have to do is line this up to the edge and I'm guaranteed to have a very straight piece. But then I need to, to mount it to my actual board. So then I add this thicker washi tape to mount it to my board. That's why you have to.
It all makes sense now.
Yes, there is a method to the madness. We'll have plenty of time if anybody wants to share, whether it be your swatch page or your finished piece or just what you did. That'd be wonderful. Oh no. When the washi tape traps you. Have nails on, so it's hard to grip things now.
All right, as you are approaching the last piece of washi tape, if anybody wants to share what they created today, feel free to turn your camera on. I'd be happy to spotlight you so we can all take a look. But also know that you don't have to share if you don't want to. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, if you want to share your final piece on Mix, everybody's on there. So we'll hop on there after.
I will say, as just a personal spot of growth for myself, this is the first time I feel like I've done the class illustration example and then the actual class illustration, and the colors are very comparable in saturation. That is a step up for me.
Which one do you like better, Bree?
I feel like I like the flame better of this one, but I like the candle and the shadows better on this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I love being able to see the contrast between the two because it kind of helps me to be able to critique my own work. Absolutely, Jenny. Thank you so much for joining today.
Can we take another look at your like swatch page with all the tests? That's also really like nice to look at sometimes.
Yeah. I was planning to just start off with a new one today, but I try not to waste paper. So I figured we'll go ahead and add to the rest. No worries, Pam. I'm just glad you were able to make it. These were some of my example things as I was working out ideas and stuff.
When I first saw you practicing the round colors, I was like, this is also a technique to illustrate donuts. Looks like a donut or a bagel.
It does. It very much looks like a donut or a bagel. Oh, now I'm hungry.
Lori, I see that you've turned your camera on. Do you want to show us what you made? You're on mute at the moment.
Yeah, I tried to do a bokeh effect but I'm really kind of lousy at placement on the bokeh, so I'm working on stuff like that at home. But
Ooh, I
that's
love
what I
that.
got so far.
Oh,
Thank
I love
you.
your flame. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
Love it. You have a
That's because
beautiful-
you're seeing it from afar.
No.
Now, this was fun.
I'm glad.
I liked it. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. I appreciate that. Love
You
seeing
bet.
all of what you guys do.
It almost looks like it almost looked like a pastel effect too, from afar. I don't know what it looks like up close. Nice work, Lori. Thank you for sharing.
Sometimes what I do when I'm done with the painting
Mhm.
is I'll let it dry completely for like 24 hours. And then I'll just wash it with water to soften all the, like if something looks too dark or something looks too light, I do that and it kind of blends it together a little bit better. I do that when I do botanical style art.
Beautiful.
That's an
Thank
interesting
you.
technique.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I am very impatient, but I
It's
know that
it's called Save Your Piece.
yes, yes. I know sometimes with watercolor, it can really benefit you to like wait long periods of time to let it completely dry. That's beautiful though.
Hey, Bree, can I make a request?
Sure.
When this post goes live on, well, when this recording goes live on the ArtSnacks Mix page or the WatercolorSnacks Mix page, would you be able to link some more reference photos? This candle is beautiful, but I'm curious if people want to like practice illumination in other areas, whether it's like a moon or more candles or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I can absolutely do that. I actually have several different candles references that I pulled from. So I can absolutely do that.
Yeah, I think that would be fun.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be holiday related. It can just be anything. Because I think illumination is a really unique technique that sort of gets overlooked.
Yeah, definitely. That's why we made the effort to practice it today. Again, I feel like it's just kind of the perfect wintry, cozy feeling. Wonderful. Yeah, I'll do that.
Awesome. All right, so we got a couple minutes left. If anybody else wants to share or has a question, feel free to drop it in the chat. I'm happy to spotlight you. Otherwise, we'd love to see what you made if you want to post it on the Mix group. And I guess just some announcements. The next live stream isn't until next year.
No.
So we've got some time. We're still working with this box and this color palette. So there'll be 2 live streams in January. And then February is the next box that'll ship out. So new color palette. Totally.
I'm excited. I've very much been enjoying the colors in this quarters box. Core is one of my favorites. They're so vibrant.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. No worries, Sherry. Yeah, keep practicing if it helps. I'm really bad at it myself. So I think I've really only attempted this time. I attempted it for the first time this week. So you and I will be learning together.
We would have never guessed, Bree, because these look pretty awesome.
Thanks. All right.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you guys, everyone for showing up and for just hanging out today and making art. It was really great to be able to bring this to you.
yeah. Thank you, Bree, for your time, and for everybody joining us. Thank you, and happy holidays.
Happy holidays.
Very exciting. We'll see you on the internet.
Yes.
In the time being.
And see you at the next live stream next year.
Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks again.